And hello again from Fox News in Washington. The U.S.-led coalition continues to pound ISIS targets with airstrikes in Iraq and Syria. The United Arab Emirates says it will rejoin the air campaign, sending a squadron of F-16 fighters to Jordan. And Jordan dismisses ISIS claims an American aid worker was killed in a coalition airstrike as criminal propaganda. At this key moment, we're honored to have a rare interview with Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who retired last summer as director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Pentagon's CIA. Over more than 30 years, he held almost every top-level military intel post, and he helped revolutionize how our military handles intelligence. General Flynn, welcome to Fox News.
Thanks for having me.
The Obama administration issued a new national security strategy on Friday. In it, President Obama writes this: "The challenges we face require strategic patience and persistence." And National Security Advisor Susan Rice said this:
"While the dangers we face may be more numerous and varied, they are not of the existential nature we confronted during World War II or during the Cold War. We cannot afford to be buffeted by alarmism and a nearly instantaneous news cycle."
General, is that the right way to look at the threat from Islamic extremism?
Well, let me just start out by saying that, obviously, if you read the national security strategy, it's very complex. This is not about one president or one administration or another. This is about the nation's strategy going forward. And I would tell you that we are facing a form of a cancerous component of the Islamic religion, which has a fanaticism to it that has everything which is against our way of life, and they, in fact, have declared war on us. And I think that we have to recognize that. The biggest challenge right now is what I kind of describe as the wolf or the wolf pack closest to the sled is ISIS. But there are other wolf packs around the world right now that are actually part of this larger, expanding, violent, extremist version of Islam.
But when the president talks about, quote, strategic patience, when Susan Rice says this is not an existential threat and that we shouldn't be caught up in the alarmism of the news cycle, is that an adequate response to the threat you've just laid out?
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think what the American public is looking for is they're looking for moral and intellectual courage and clarity, and not a sense of, and I just say as passivity or confusion. I mean, I think that there's confusion about what it is that we're facing. It's not just what has been defined as 40,000 fighters in the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. It's also a large segment within this radical version of Islam that is actually, is threatening our way of life.
And when you talk about passivity or confusion, is that what you see coming out of this White House?
What I see is, it's not just the White House. I mean, I really do believe that when members of Congress are yelling at the White House for strategy and the White House is talking back to them, I think what they really need to do is they need to sit down and figure out what is our strategy going forward. Okay. This is not about one administration or the other. This is about how do we move forward against this radical form of Islam?
Well, let's talk about that, because you say that first thing we must do is we have to adequately and accurately identify the enemy. Last week, General Jack Keane showed us a map, and let's put it up on the screen, and it's pretty alarming, because what you see there is Islamic terror groups, not just ISIS, Islamic terror groups extending all the way from Pakistan and Afghanistan all the way across the Middle East into North Africa. So precisely, General, who or what is the enemy?
Yeah. Chris, 10 years ago I was drawing that map and there was only 2 or 3 dots on it. Today what you're seeing on a map like that is a doubling of the enemy. And what I have...
A doubling of the enemy?
Or a doubling or more, because usually our numbers that we define, the size of the scale of the enemy that we're facing, it's usually lower than what it really is. I would tell you that what we have in front of us and the strategy that we've had for over a decade, which is sort of this counterterrorism strategy, that is only a component of an overall strategy. And I think that what we have to do is recognize that it is not working. The counterterrorism component works just fine to go after the high-value targets and the key leaders, but we need a much broader strategy that recognizes that we're facing not just this tactical problem of ISIS in Iraq and Syria, but just as that map showed, we're facing a growing, expanding threat around the world in some cases, particularly in the trans-region of the Middle East, Central Asia, North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa.
So are you saying that at this moment, after all these years, that we do not have a coherent strategy, full 360 degrees, to combat Islamic terrorism?
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is that the strategy that we've had is it's not working. I mean, it's clearly not working. I mean, just look at the kinds of things that we're facing. I mean, in my world, what I have grown up to have to do is define the enemy that we are facing. And like I've said, if you can't defeat an enemy that you don't admit exists. And I think that we have to clearly define what the enemy is. That's number one. And I think the next thing is to clearly articulate a strategy that is broader than just counterterrorism, broader than just, and I hate to just use the sort of the military vernacular of airstrikes, but I feel like we are, we're kind of like a football team with the quarterback at the huddle, and the quarterback says, ready, break. Everybody's supposed to step to the line, and the team's supposed to move down the field together in a synchronized way, to the goal line to win. I feel like when we say ready, break, all the players that are on the team, they're going off into different stadiums playing different sports. I mean, we really don't have an effective strategy that is coherent, that actually addresses the wider problem.
I want to get into...
Which is the ideology, Chris.
I want to get into that in just a moment. But this week seemed to be something of a turning point, because with the savage burning to death of the Jordanian pilot, you had a huge explosion across the Middle East. Jordan obviously escalating its efforts. You hear expressions of outrage in Cairo, in Qatar, in Turkey. Is this a potential turning point to get more Arab buy-in in opposing not just ISIS, but Islamic extremism?
Yeah. We should quit using phrases like turning points and tipping points. There's been multiple turning points, multiple tipping points. What we need to do is we need to come to grips with this cancerous form of the Islamic religion that is breaking down the Arab world order. And that is very clear. All you have to do is look at the different countries where these groups exist. And that breakdown of that Arab world order is affecting Europe. It's affecting this country. We have, as our great director of the FBI said recently in a statement that he made in Mississippi, I believe, talking about the numbers of radical Islamists that are in this country that are being convinced to go overseas as part of this effort that's happening in the Middle East right now. I mean, just the stunning number of foreign fighters alone that have traveled to Syria, and the numbers of countries, I think it's somewhere between 40 and 50. So we have to come to grips with this. This is not just a problem in Iraq and Syria.
Okay, so let's get off the counterterrorism side, right, and let's talk about the other, because you have said, look, we have to combat what's going on in the Middle East and also outside the Middle East now with these recruits, with economic efforts, with cultural efforts, with psychological efforts to fight this ideology. How?
Right. So I think that the first thing we have to do is we have to look at how are we organized inside of our own country to deal with it, and then we have to look at how do we want to organize ourselves internationally. And I think for our own country, it's looking at how the State Department is involved in this, how the Department of Defense is involved in this, and how the CIA is involved in this. I mean, I think all three of those components have a role nationally, but we have to organize better in order to achieve what we want to do in our own self-interest. And then internationally, we have to come to grips with the Arab nations that are part of this problem in many cases, to get them to come together. And it's not just what's happening in Jordan or what's happening in Saudi or what the Emiratis are doing or what is going on in Libya or Mali or Nigeria. All of them need to come together, but there are problems with that.
Well, let me ask you, because you have suggested an Arab NATO, a kind of mutual defense organization like we have with our allies in Western Europe. Is that realistic to get these countries to come together?
If we don't, then what we'll continue to see is a breakdown between what I call as the leader and the led. I mean, these countries, all of them, are at risk if they don't come together and work together to achieve what it is that we are all saying is to get to this moderate form of Islam if it exists. I was sent a note about where we've had, 126 Muslim scholars recently, crying out about that this type of Islam is not appropriate for that particular religion. Why only 126? There should be 126,000. I mean, more of the Arab nations, more of the leaders need to step up to the plate. I applaud.
But how do we do that? And again, how do we? I mean, look, what we're talking about here, and you have pointed out to me, this isn't just kids. Sometimes these are middle-aged professionals, doctors,
engineers, teachers. That's right.
Right. And what is it? Something, they obviously find something from ISIL and these other Islamic groups that is attractive and appealing to them. How do we shake some sense into them, if you will?
Well, I think for the young people that are being attracted, I think it's a disconnect. In fact, I know it's a disconnect between sort of what I would describe as the leader and the led, or in many cases, their parents and these young children that are being attracted to this. But I mean, the economic depravity, the corruption that exists in some of these nations. I mean, we have to recognize that the social and cultural, psychological underpinnings that are at risk and that are challenging these countries are going to come back to bite them. And in fact, that's what we are seeing.
I know you don't want to be political about this, and you've made it clear, and I respect that, but there was a comment made this week by President Obama that I want to play. Here it is.
Unless we get on our high horse and think this is unique to some other place, remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ.
Honestly, General, at this particular moment at time when we are in a brutal fight, and we've seen just how brutal it can be with ISIS, how productive is it for the president to try to put what ISIS is doing in historical perspective with what the West did 1,000 years ago, and how productive to use the word Crusades, which is an epithet which they throw at us for it to come out of the president's mouth?
Yeah, the risk that we take by comparing religions to religions, what we should be doing is we should be looking at one side being those contributing nations of the world, those that are willing to help the greater good of humanity against this radical form of Islam. And that's where I'm at. And that's where I think we need to be projecting ourselves forward and not looking. I mean, history is an indicator for a lot of things, and we should study it and we should know it. And we should recognize it for what it is. But right now, as I said earlier, the wolf closest to the sled is this radical form of Islam. The tactical issue is ISIS or ISIL in the greater Levant area, which is essentially Syria and Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, etc. But the wider problem is not just trans-regional in that part of the world, but it's also global. I mean, 40 to 50 countries supplying fighters to this current fight in the Middle East. Come on.
And when you were head a few months ago of the Defense Intelligence Agency, if you'd seen the president was going to start talking about the Crusades, what would you have said?
I would have recommended that he talk about something else.
Because?
Because I just don't think it's appropriate. I really don't think it's appropriate to begin to compare religions to religions. I mean, we are not about, religions fighting religions. What we're about is the greater good of the people of this world, of this planet, particularly this country, fighting against this evil that exists. And this evil that exists is inside of this religion. And so it's just like other ideologies that we face, Chris. We faced the Nazis. We faced the communists. We defeated those ideologies. This is another ideology that we are going to have to face. And those contributing nations of the world and those Arab nations, as I said, if they don't come to grips with this, they're going to feel the pain.
Well, finally, and that's my last question, because you have compared the fight we face against Islamic extremism to World War II or to the Cold War and our battle for half a century against the communists. And you have called for a unified chain of command, much like we had with General Eisenhower against the Nazis in Western Europe in World War II. Question, honestly, you were there in the Pentagon at the DIA for the last couple of years. Who is in charge of this war right now?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think that we need to be asking that question. It can't be the president. It can't be the Secretary of State. The reason why I used Eisenhower essentially was, General Eisenhower, go defeat the Nazis in Europe, go win the war in Europe, and here's the resources resources, here's the authorities, here's all the permissions. Everybody's going to work for you essentially to achieve that purpose. And he did.
And I have to ask briefly, is there anybody who's in that role right now?
I can't sit here and tell you that I know who it is. I really don't, which is part of the problem. And so everybody's in charge, nobody's in charge. And it's like the analogy that I just used with the football team. I mean, we're saying ready, break, and everybody's going into different stadiums. This is not something that we have to face the reality that that it is staring us in the face right now. And that's this expansion of radical Islam, and they are against our way of life, and we have to make sure that we understand that. And the growth of it over the last decade, okay, so it goes between a couple of administrations, and it will continue to go. As I said, you know, the statements I've made, this is more than just something that's going to be solved in the next 2 years. This is going to have to take 10 years, maybe an entire generation or more.
General Flynn, thank you. Thanks for joining us today, sir.
Thanks, Chris.
Please come.
I will.
I'd like to continue the conversation.